I'm very, very pleased to meet with you here today. And I met with a number of people last evening over some coffee. And I'm one of those people that would have been termed about 5, 6, 7 years ago as spiritual but not religious. You've heard of those folks. And I was always chafing at the structure of religion and how it was. And then eventually came to understand that I needed to be inside to help affect change. And so I'm a change agent. I was telling people what also came to my attention was if you can show up at a parish and you're warden within the first 6 months, you know there's some issues within the organization, and then become on the diocesan council within a year, and then council general synod within 3 years. Is that there is stuff that needs to be done, and as the primate told me last November, the reason he keeps me around is that I call them on their shit. So did I say that early in the conversation before you get to know me? Anyways, what I'd like to talk to you about today is actually, I'm starting this morning talking about what I refer to as mission building. I know it said rethinking the sacred, but you'll see in a moment or two that rethinking what the sacred is and where the sacred is and how to express the sacred and how to introduce people to sacred actually falls within this sort of category, which is a sort of a double entente. It was mission building, which is building mission, and the other one is sort of like the mission impossible type way of connotation, which in a sense, not that this is impossible, but the mission as to what to do with the buildings as well. So it's sort of a double entente here. So maybe we go to the first slide. I'm going to give you, in my agenda for the day, the tenets in which I operate as I do work within the church. That's what we're going to talk about, this first part of it. And then I'm going to have something called naming the grill in the corner. Actually, it's naming the grill in the corner. And then I'm going to talk about a number of areas of hope and transitions. I'm going to talk about buildings themselves. I'm going to go through that process with you and then have you start maybe using some of the tenets in which I use to do my work to think about your buildings as they help or hinder what your mission is and how you can make them more effective tools for mission. I'll also add in there, of course, my other role, which is the greening of the church. And it's not just greening for greening purposes, it's actually reducing expenses. And I'll share some pretty significant anecdotes that are sort of fun. I've worked, as you might have heard from the introduction, sort of at that national policy level and coordinating level and chairing various committees. But I've also been the person who's not only been a people's warden, but property manager. I've stepped away from people's warden some time ago in a former parish to my new parish, where I'm property manager. I actually oversaw, as the general manager, of a major transition of space last summer. So I've got my hands pretty dirty on that front, and we'll share some of that experience, because you can talk in general terms, but until you get right down to doing stuff, that's where people mostly relate to. Can we maybe move to the next slide then, please? You've got a new job. So tenets on which I base my work in the church, to me it's pretty straightforward, and it should be pretty straightforward to Anglicans. Now, I've now been told maybe it's not quite so straightforward, but I'm going to suggest to you, you should know what the baptismal covenant is, and you should know what the 5 marks of mission are for the national church. Not only the national church, the global church, the Anglican Communion, the 80-some million of us, is that and it's like any organization, you should know what your mission is, or how do you know if you're accomplishing it, or how do you know if you're focusing your attention? So maybe we go to the next slide then. So the baptismal covenant and the 5 marks of mission, they follow the following, and this is the way they're stated here: to proclaim the good news of the kingdom. Who's seen these before? Good. Hey, excellent. I was told last evening people wouldn't know what these were. I'm very pleased. The second one is to teach, baptize, and nurture new believers. And the bishop asked me, or suggested last evening, the word new should either be taken out of there, or I would say not take it out but also add something in there because it's new believers, because you're supposed to go out and introduce them through the first Mark mission, but it's also to strengthen the existing congregants in their spiritual growth as well, so new and existing. To respond to human need by loving service. We do a lot of that generally. That's a lot of our outreach work. The number 4 is to seek to transform unjust structures of society, to challenge violence of every kind and pursue peace and reconciliation. And the 5th one, which I look at as my responsibility in national church, is the 5th Mark of Mission. I'm the cheerleader on that one, is to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. Next slide. Now, you've probably seen these in your Anglican journal simplified. Well, they should be simplified because the other ones are too wordy. Share the good news. Teach new believers and strengthening existing believers. Yeah. Help people in need. Work to make things fairer and look after the planet. And if you can keep to those tenets as you look at everything you do, you go like, well, I'm doing such a... Does it respond to achieving some of these marks of mission? Because in a sense, the baptismal covenant is your promise. Yes, it's not just when you're baptized, it's when you do it at Easter. And it's like, I promise to do these things. That's what a baptismal covenant is. And the other one, the 5 marks of mission, sort of, it's a checklist. Are you doing these things? And I would contend that we need to really look at them because part of the reason why our numbers are going down is I'm not sure we're doing such a good job in Mark Commission 1 and 2. We've got really good on social justice issues and we're feeding the poor and things of this nature. And we're starting to get better with creation care type related stuff, which we'll talk about today. But we really need to think about all the marks and missions at the same time. So, one of the things I've noticed, you would have one of these aha moments after you've been speaking to people for a lot of time about certain issues. It was an aha moment happened last week when I was speaking to the staff person at the national level of the Anglican Church of Canada, who is the staff support for some of the work I do. And she credited me with saying this, but she was the one to recognize this, is that actually the first 4 marks of mission has to do is oriented towards people action. The 5th mark of mission is actually oriented towards place, the environment, the rivers, the streams. It also is where we can place our buildings, because a building is a place. And to me, I'll tell you a bit later, our buildings, and this one excluded here, I think, because you probably did a reasonably good job in designing it. But our buildings generally are some of the worst offenders from an environmental perspective of any category of building in Canada. Okay? And I've got some really deep stats on that, but we'll share that this afternoon. So here's the other tenet in which I operate. Now, sometimes this is credited, I think on the advertising was credited to an archbishop. I think for most people, C.S. Lewis is probably more famous than some former archbishop, because actually C.S. Lewis wrote this, but this Archbishop Temple keeps claiming it. He's long gone. A church is the only organization that exists primarily for the benefit of non-members. So we need to remember that, because if it's about our own comfort for those of us who sit here or sit in our parishes, we're missing the boat. And you wonder why our numbers are going down. Well, if you keep this and the 5 marks of mission and the baptismal covenant as a gauge against which you judge everything that you do or plan to do, I think you're in pretty good stead. Sacred. I know it was advertised as, I'm talking about the sacred this morning. So my headspace is that some people think sacred must be the sacred building. It must be the church building. And I go, yeah, it can be. But what the word sacred means is that it's worthy of or regarded with reverence, awe, or respect by association with divinity or divine things. So yes, a building can be sacred, but so many other things can be sacred as well. And I would suggest to you that much of the population are not connected to our buildings. They're connected to other things that they may identify as sacred sooner more readily, and we have to get our mind set that it's not just about our buildings. My way of thinking is God created all and is omnipresent. sacred can be found everywhere. So there's different forms of sacred. And different forms of sacred speak to people differently. It could be the music. Some people find their moments in the music, the closeness. I'm a bit Celtic in background, so, the thin spaces, A number of you smiling, you understand thin spaces. I'm also a pilgrimage walker. Trevor, where are you? Camino man. There we go. I'm also a long-distance pilgrimage walker, and we're going to chat a bit more. I've done St. Cuthbert's, St. Oswald's, one in France. You've done the Camino. Camino's going to happen soon for me. But you can meet God in other places. So there are the scriptures, the writings, etc. To me, they're also not the best. Not only the best stuff happened 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever years ago. There's some really good stuff happening now, and some of that really good stuff, even in contemporary music, is speaking to people. Is introducing the sacred to people too. So we have to be open to being able to see the sacred in different places where other people can see the sacred and be able to connect with them. So again, the thin places can be the buildings. Yes. They can be in creation, or it can be in the inner space. If you're contemplative like I am, God is within. Jesus is within. So how do you connect to people who are contemplatives where the inner space is also a sacred space? I'll give you an anecdote. In Synod 2012 in Ottawa, a group of us were asked to do a workshop. And there were 3 workshops going on at the same time. And we called ours Meeting God in Other Places Than Sunday Morning. And it was free flow as to who would attend what session. You could choose anyone you would want. 70% of the people in the Synod came to our workshop, and the other 30% was split between the 2 other workshops. We talked about centering prayer. We talked about pilgrimage walking. We talked about labyrinths. So 70% of the people showed up for those type of things because they wanted the experience of the aha moment, the thin space. There are other ways of doing that. And our buildings can help us or they can hinder us in that regard. And we need to be out beyond our walls as well. And some of these thematics will come back up in my conversation with you this afternoon, and hopefully come up in our breakout groups as you start applying some of my tenets, or some of these tenets, not my tenets, some of these tenets to maybe thinking about your space. Next one, please. So, responsibilities. I think our responsibilities are as follows. I took a homiletics course at St. Paul University, and one of the things that I remember out of that was from generation to generation to spread the word in ways that can be heard and understood. That is what our responsibilities are. So it's not about us as communicators. It is about those who need to hear things. And so how do they hear things? So it's not, design your communication centrically to yourself. It's to the, I use the word audience per se, the people you want to reach. Sort of meet people where they're at, both spiritually and locationally as well. If that's a word, locationally, but in location. Because they're not necessarily conveniently finding their way to our doors, so how else do we meet them? My other one here, just from my business background, is starting to show, failing to plan is planning to fail, failing to act is failing. And so you may say, hey, we got a problem, we should do something about it, but somebody else should do it, or I don't get it, I don't know if we can really do it. Well, if you don't act upon what you've discovered, you're probably going to fail. And there needs to be this new spirit on entrepreneurialism and creativity in our midst. And it's not just the clergy, it's the lay people, to be able to rethink how we do things, how we evoke the sacred, and how we introduce the sacred, how we make those opportunities happen. We don't make them happen, they happen. God makes them happen, but how we can facilitate situations where they can come about, but leave room for the Spirit to act. If we're too rigid, people sometimes don't get the opportunity to have the Spirit act with them. So there is a particular hymn that I'm not going to ask you to sing because I am a terrible singer. Actually, I'm told I'm tone deaf by my wife. Yeah, sing solo, but nobody hears you. But this one was used back about a month ago. And maybe we can, it's called the Great Commission. It's hymn 433. And to me, we have a Great Commission that's been given to us to do various work. Now, I've taken the liberty of putting certain things in black. What you'll find within that hymn, which was written in 1978, I believe it was actually all the 5 marks of mission on the next 2 slides. So what I'm suggesting to you, the 5 marks of mission and the baptismal covenant is a foundation against which you can apply a number of things to which to judge whether what you're doing is the most appropriate and effective as possible. And so maybe we just do the next slide there too. I was first going to have us all say, but let's not do that at the moment. But just look up hymn 433 at some point, the Great Commission. We've been given by God, because we're his arms and legs and eyes and all that stuff on earth. We've been given a commission to do these things. And we have to ask ourselves, are we doing them to the best of our ability or not? And I think the next one's about a gorilla, but we'll leave that one to this afternoon. Thanks. Well, thank you very much. As it was indicated, I was going to carry on from the first part. I wanted to establish the tenets on which myself personally, I base the various things I do in the church as to, in the church I mean in this sense, the church as the community of people who come together to do things together in the glory of God. Just remind you of this, so we covered the tenets. I'm going to have something called the gorilla in the corner, which you probably understand, but may depress you a wee bit, but I'm going to write in the hope right after that, okay? So don't let that get in the way of feeling a bit better later, because there are some really good signs of hope. Talking about how buildings and mission need to go together, because either the building serves the mission or does not serve the mission, and what you can do about that. And then I'm going to talk about the 5 marks of mission as they pertain to buildings, and then I'm going to break you out in groups so that you can ask yourself some of these questions and share them amongst you, and then we'll have you come back, one person from each table, and just sort of add something to the whole room as such. And I'm going to talk about what I refer to as getting real, and then so you want to do something with your building. It's something around timelines, resources, this type of thing. And then what are your next steps? And I think maybe at that point, I'm going to put you on the spot, Bishop Dave, is that maybe the next thing you might want to say some words on that, or you may want to delegate as the bishop as you can, somebody else to sort of say, on behalf of this diocese, here's what I think I've heard, or here's what I think I've heard from the room is what we might want to do. So let's go to the first one here. This is the gorilla one. Next slide, please. Naming the gorilla that's sitting in the corner of the room. Now look over your shoulder. There's a gorilla over there. That gorilla over there, you've got to know about that gorilla. You can't just say, oh, we're going to grow. We're going to do certain things if we don't name that gorilla sitting over in the corner, because it's against that backdrop we have to act and plan our plans. This is from the Stats Canada surveys. They ask questions about a religious affiliation. Now, the word affiliation or affinity doesn't mean when I ask somebody, or they ask somebody, do you attend church? They don't ask that question. They say, of the following denominations, how would you identify yourself? And some people say, I really don't go to church, but I went to Sunday school in such and such a denomination. Yeah, I guess I'm still that. Okay, and in Quebec, for example, there's a high percentage of Roman Catholics from that type of survey, but they would say, well, yeah, culturally they're Roman Catholics, but not really practicing, yet so that's why some of the Roman Catholic numbers are so high, is because there's an identification culturally. And in some places, there's been a number of generations since anybody's gone to church, is that you ask somebody and they look back and say, well, I never went to Sunday school, I really don't have any affinity at all. Or there's going to be a whole group of folks that would say, I've thought about this and none of the above. Okay? So over the past 20 years, we have... Can you hear me without me sticking right to the microphone? And if I can't... Please use the mic. I thought I could. There we go. Get away with that. I just want to wander around a bit. United Church. This is in the last 20 years. United Church of Canada has lost 35% of the people even have an affinity towards that. Okay, and it's actually increasing. So there are people saying they had affinity in the 10 years between 1991 and 2001. Said there was 8% less people that said they had an affinity. But then 29%, and above and beyond that. So overall, they've lost 35% of people saying they have any affinity to the United Church. Presbyterian, 26% lost affinity. Incredible. I don't know, there's something wrong with these numbers. But anyways, in the Presbyterian case, they lost 36 in the previous 10 years, 1991 to 2001. They lost 36%. They've slowed down somewhat. Maybe they got down to that core. They just won't not have an affinity. I really don't know. The Anglican Church, we've fallen by 25% in 20 years. Again, we lost 7% in the period ending in 2001, and then we lost another 20%. So overall, in the 20-year period, we lost 25% of people who didn't have any affinity towards the Anglican Church. Lutheran, Baptist, etc. Baptists are even losing people, even though they had gained for a period of time. They're starting to lose again. And Roman Catholics they've gone 4% in 20 years. They're up 4% in 20 years, but they went up significantly because immigration from Roman Catholic countries in a period of time. But in the last 10 years, they've actually gone down. So they're net positive 4, but they were up higher than that. And as immigration patterns change, and as time goes on, and people in Quebec don't claim they have Roman Catholic affinity because basically, they're not going now, but then they don't carry their affinity, you're going to see that number coming down. And it is differential in different parts. The Roman Catholic is because if you're in large centers, the numbers are holding, but in the rural areas or the smaller town areas, the numbers are falling. So in a sense, not only have they fallen, but the rate of decline is accelerating. Next slide, please. And the group that is increasing the fastest, from an absolute number and a percentage basis as well, everybody thinks, it must be the Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs or something or other. It is actually the group that says none of the above. I made a decision, it's none of the above. And a lot of people there would say, I'm spiritual but not religious. And they, in 1991, were 12.6% of the Canadian population. 2001, 16.5% of the population. And 2011, 23.9% of the Canadian population. So about 1 in 4 says, I've thought about it, none of the above. I'm not interested in religion. I'm spiritual, but not religious. Now, that is a more solid number than the other numbers, because the other numbers say I have a historical connection or memory of being affiliated with something. This is actually a positive, in a sense, decision made. Whereas the other one was this sort of, I have a historical memory. This is a decision made, I have no interest in the above. This is 131% growth in that 20-year period. It is second only to the Roman Catholic Church, to those who have an affinity towards the Roman Catholic Church. It's second only as a number. And it is more in absolute number than all the Protestant denominations put together. Now, if I was going to say, where is the growth going to come from? It's not going to be, there's an Anglican church over there in trouble. You got to get some more over here in ours, and we're going to grow over here. Or, maybe we can, do something with that. You find some people from that denomination and get into our denomination. That's not the way it's going to work, because it's all coming down. So you're trying to find more market share in a decreasing market. Really difficult. You should find your market share, talking business-wise here, but in this group, because I'm spiritual but not religious. But the thing is, what they don't like is the way it's been done, and they can't identify with it. It doesn't mean that they won't attend. It doesn't mean that they won't participate with you. It doesn't mean that there's not something that significant can be done here. But it's us that has to change, not them. I would I would suggest to you that a good book to read is one by Diana Butler Bass. She's the Episcopal theologian of the U.S. She sometimes does conferences up here in Canada. You know, she says a lot of different things. And she talks about some of these demographics. But one of the things that I would say is the 3 Bs, which is, and then having to flip the 3 Bs on their head, it was, I believe. Let's recite all that together. I believe these creeds. Okay. You got that one. Well, okay, for a period of time we're going to have you here, and we as the ones who are already here, well, you're behaving good enough, okay? Yeah. Well, you can belong to us now. And so that's often expressed by somebody who shows up at a service and nobody talks to them. Well, you're not one of us yet. You don't belong. Because that was the third thing that was supposed to happen in the old metric. Or, I don't know if anybody's put a metric as that was the objective, but that's sort of the way it played out. Flip it on its head is now, how can you interact with people, particularly in this group, to say, let's do something that we feel like we belong together. Oh, cool. Hey, that's not so bad. How can we then, what can we do together? That's the behaving part. And then you can work with them to understand the believing part, because they probably already have a belief system that's not so far off us that come to church, per se. And so flip it on its head. So I think there's, here, I gave you a bit of, oh, sounds bad, look at these declines. But the thing is there's some positives here. This is your mission area. It's not necessarily, let's get on a plane and fly somewhere. Our mission here is inside our own country. It's particularly this demographic. And I'll share a success story where we've actually approached that demographic and engaged them under the 3 Bs by flipping the 3 Bs on their head. But that's the later segment of the presentation. Faith buildings in Canada. This is a bit of a downer. Natural Resources Canada in 2009, as part of understanding building types and their energy consumption, houses are a building category, faith groups are a building category, shopping malls are a building category, etc., found that there were 27,600 faith group buildings in Canada. 27,600 faith group buildings in Canada. And in terms of numbers, they were only second to houses. And in terms of value, they were only second to the Queen, i.e. the Government of Canada. So we have this great big resource that is illiquid. So in many senses, I would say we're running on fumes, cash poor, asset rich, and what does that usually mean in business? Convert some of your fixed assets into liquidity to get yourself going again. What they also found is that these buildings were some of the worst offenders from a building type. Because of their architecture and the age they were built, they were not used that much, old components, and often not managed professionally as a system. And I'll give you a few more examples of that when I get into it, because you think that the parish that I belong to has got everything right. I keep finding stuff that I have overlooked as property manager. I've got it in my pocket here. It's very valuable. And, that's giving you a little hook to keep listening. Anyway, and the thing is that these buildings are an affront to the Fifth Mark Mission. Remember a little bit earlier, I said that the only Mark of Mission that pertained to property, or the things like the rest were action oriented towards people. This is where I start my work within the church. Is the Fifth Mark of Mission as it pertains to the buildings, as it pertains to the management of those buildings. Natural Resources Canada compared the waste in our buildings, collectively, all the faith groups in our buildings, as the equivalent of cutting down 1.7 million hectares of trees annually from a greenhouse gas perspective. We are extremely wasteful. The other aspect of this is that it's not just how much energy is used in the building, it's that if you're not using it very much, you don't have very good intensity, so that some of it's being used to heat, light, whatever, when nobody's there. And so there's an intensity thing. So we've started something called mission per square foot, which I'll talk about a bit later. So I'm working on a parish, diocesan, national level, interfaith-wise, and trying to mobilize some things in this category here. And it's not like pie in the sky. There are actually some good things happening, and actually is bearing results from a mission perspective. Next slide, please. Conclusion on buildings based on trends and demographics. If consolidation were to occur within denominations, probably a third of the buildings are in surplus. Of 27,600, that's 9,200 buildings across the country. Can you imagine, and a lot of them are within 5 years of coming to that state. How many parishes are running deficits, operating deficits, and taking from previous legacy funds, so when the rectory was sold or when there was a large bequeath or something? I know in the Ottawa diocese that's more than 50% of the parishes. And it's like if they're losing 30 a year and they have 120 left, they know they got 4 more years of life. And you can do nothing, goodbye, but you've already failed. If you have to do something about it or not, but you have to make a deliberate decision. If consolidation were to occur between denominations, like sharing of buildings, it's more than a third that are in surplus. Internal studies within dioceses that I've seen validate these statements, saying that a third of them are last generation congregations. And they describe what a last generation congregation, what the behavior and attitudes of them were, which, oh, it used to be so good. I remember historically this. Our priest has just got to get out there and make it all happen. Our priest had to do that. The diocese has to do that. They have to save us. Oh, don't you have a role to play? No, it's the priest, it's the diocese. And the moment that they are no longer a community of people who have at the heart of it to preserve that community, like everybody responsible, they're done. Okay, it's not somebody else going to do it. You've got to look around. It needs to be done. Oh, somebody else. It's got to be yourselves. Here, Diocese of Fredericton. Now, I heard a report this morning. Maybe the numbers are slightly different, but not far off. These I got from Irene as the end of 2013. End of 2013, 78 parishes, 136 congregations, and 5,672 identifiable givers. Total envelopes, a certain amount. Givings per week was $26.81, or $1,394 on average. Now we know some people give $10,000 a year, and some people find 2 quarters to put together in a collection plate. It's all over the place, but that's what the average is. So there is a bit of historical stuff here, and Irene commented, well, we're concerned about the number of identifiable givers going down, but we're pleased that the amount's going up. But one doesn't quite bounce off the other, of course. I'm going to contrast you to the Ottawa diocese. Because some people say, oh, you're from Ottawa. It's very different there. If you've got to have lots of money. It's up in Ottawa. Well, Ottawa diocese is about 4 hours to drive across. And some of the rural areas, particularly in Western Quebec, are extremely, extremely in poverty. So, not terribly different than some of the areas, I'm sure, here in New Brunswick. We have 71 parishes, 115 congregations, 12 chapels that open once a year for picnics, 8,500 and some identifiable givers, which is a reduction of 238 in a year. Our average annual givings are $1,287, and we have 70 full-time priests to do that. I checked it, full-time priest equivalents. You have 67 full-time priest equivalents in this diocese. As compared to Fredericton Diocese, Ottawa has 7 fewer parishes, 21 fewer congregations, 2,800, almost 2,900 more identifiable givers, 50% more folks, but our givings are less. Okay, so we're not, some rich pie in the sky. Ottawa Diocese must have all sorts of resources. We actually have more identifiable givers, but we have less fixed assets to try to carry on that. My conclusion is you got a fixed asset problem here. Flip to the next one. Embracing God's future. This is a deliberate engagement process over the last year and a half in the Ottawa Diocese. And I'm only giving this here as if you want to hit on it, because you'll get a copy of this. You can see what the report was and the questions were and all this type of thing. And he went around and probably engaged 750 parishioners in various formats, from synod meeting, great chapter meetings, out into the congregations, etc. And the following was what came out of it. Number one priority, overwhelming by far of the 5 priorities for the diocese: deal with these buildings, they're killing us. And basically it says, consistently and overwhelmingly, our prayer revealed an imperative to make the stewardship of our real estate and the reshaping of parish ministry a priority. A great many responses named the call to develop, repurpose, or dispose of buildings. Closely aligned to this was a frequent call to reduce the number of parishes through amalgamation and to examine the methods by which clergy and parishes deliver ministry. Through the stewardship of our buildings and people, we are now driven by a realistic, renewed sense of vision for ministry in our time. This report will be adopted on November the 6th, and there's going to be a very proactive approach to dealing with amalgamations and rejigging and restarting. It's not just a financial thing. So let's go to the next one. These are some of the quotes out of the page 8 of the report here. These are quotes from people who were in the consultations, and obviously these quotes help prove or help support a particular position of the report. Stop pouring money into crumbling and underused buildings. We have to stop making the walls of our church building the only space where we can worship. Become more dynamic and mission-focused. Have larger, more dynamic congregations with less focus on survival and the ability to develop programs that appeal to those outside the church. There needs to be a critical mass, because it isn't just about the Sunday morning show. Most people don't cotton to that. If you're going to do mission outside, you can't say we've got a really good Sunday morning thing, because they don't come to it. You have to find other ways. And you need a critical mass of people to be able to do something different. Here's the one. Relinquish our inordinate love of buildings. Stop worshiping our buildings. And then turn church buildings into affordable housing with congregational component, place for people. In many senses, go back to being that community center that we have been. It's about outside of ourselves. Back to my C.S. Lewis one that's also attributed to Temple. Of course, he was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Whatever. I think C.S. Lewis probably is somebody more recognized by people other than Anglicans, so why not use that? But it's about others than ourselves, because it's about just keeping us comfortable. Hey, how good is that working for you? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Stories of hope. There are stories of hope. That was depressing. Now, I think it mentioned in the introduction to me, you said something about me being a church warden, and I told you I was within 6 months. You know what my first act of being a church warden was? I lived in the country at that point versus downtown. I still have my farm equipment now. It's stored. I took my John Deere tractor and with the front end loader, and I pushed over an outhouse. And picked it up with the front end loader and put it on a fire pile and burnt it. Tough love. This is the scenario of a rural church. A particular family back in 1832 gave the piece of property and decided to give some money for the building of the church. And so their descendants, naturally, should be the wardens of the church. And, or they're married-ins or whatever. There was just sort of a category of folks. And you always remember, well, you know, it was given by Horace Peeney. This is Horace Peeney's church, and we are some of the Peeneys. And you go, oh, gosh. Anyway, so we happen to have a new priest who didn't realize what that all meant. And I was asked to be warden. They sort of meandered that somehow out of the hands of one of the anointed, the landed gentry, as they propose themselves. That carries on for forever, okay? And they have this story that nothing could change. Everything was historical. There was a back house, outhouse, behind the church. It had been used at some point. We now had a hall on it and had interior plumbing. And this outhouse, wood frame, sinking into the ground, rotting from the bottom. A raccoon lived in it. You couldn't even open the door because it was sinking into the ground. And there was a wasp nest. You can't touch that. That's the original outhouse. That was that family saying you can't touch their church building. Well, I did. Then the real story came out later on. That was only there 30 years ago. It used to be the outhouse of somebody's cottage down on the river. But you know how it is? Something shows up. Oh, it's always that way? Well, there's the flip side to that. When you do something new, finally getting it through to be new, it becomes, a couple of years later, well, it was always that way here. And so be bold a bit on these changes. You know, you meet some resistance. Doesn't mean you run away from them. It's that it's always been like that. Okay, so it's a double-sided story. But that's how I got involved with this. I knocked over an outhouse. And then the rest is, well, I'm knocking over other things, not with my tractor. But anyway, stories of hope, because there are stories of hope here. Congregations in transition. There we go. Mission per square foot. Remember, it's about intensity. You can improve the environmental performance of your building, i.e. reduce its costs for energy. But if you don't use it much, there's a problem there. Not only are we improving the performance, the environmental performance, the energy performance of the building, we are also at the same time making sure that more people are using the building. And when more people are using the building, that's more mission per square foot. We've removed a platform that had the communion rail on it. Actually, by removing that, we actually increased our space down here by 10%, making it that much more flexible. We have removed the pulpit, and we're putting slides on the bottom of it so that it can be slid into position or slid out of position depending upon the use of the space. Yes, up here in the chancel, we're making sure that everything is quite movable so that we can pull the pieces that we use in a religious service off to the sides so that the space can be used for performing arts. Like this organ, for example, which can be pulled out of the area and tucked away into the corner. Same way as we'll be able to move our pulpit and any of the other things that are used in a religious service, thus making the space that much more usable for other functions, and again, making our mission per square foot that much more significant. This is a marmoleum, which is what we're placing on the floor. It is a very environmentally friendly product. It's made out of jute, clay, wood flour, as well as linseed oil, which comes from flax plants. It's used in hospitals, dentist offices. It has a natural antiseptic in it. And we're putting this one down as the main color, and this is the inlay color, the blue one, which is used for the labyrinth.
It's a stunning place to come into. It's full of energy now. Even just the intention of all this work creates a certain grace that you can feel here.
The room here is opened up. It actually feels larger, it's still intimate, but it feels like it's got room to move around. There's less things in the way.
We now have the opportunity to even go further than that for another community or congregation, where we could have the altar, the central part of our worship, down among the people in the nave in this configuration. Can we meet people where they are? Can we speak in a ritual language that they can receive and digest?
You know, in a space like this, could you imagine doing a baptism here at the great vigil of Easter, and maybe incorporating with a procession the labyrinth in some way as a creative way of using this magnificent space? we're trying to respond to the needs of the community and the needs of a parish, we had to lay out the fact that we just can't continue as we are. We need to grow. We need to make better use of this space. We need to maximize our ministry per square foot just to be relevant.
It still feels like a worship space significantly, but it can be changed rather quickly to become other things.
Surely God didn't create a museum. He planted a beautiful garden that can be pruned and can grow into the future. Another opportunity that we are exploring and looking at is exploring social enterprise and working with other groups, other agencies, other communities in sharing the space as both a revenue generating model for the parish to support our work and ministry here, but also as another expression of ministry, especially in an environment, a multi-faith, pluralistic, secular environment where you have great organizations doing gospel ministry that may be Muslim or may belong to a yoga community that are still reaching out as the hands of Christ to those in need, and we can partner with them and work with them now in a space that has this flexibility and opportunity. We have connected with the Telford Business School. We had a wonderful MBA student do an analysis of St. Luke's as a business model, as a social enterprise model in our area, and the possibility of working with some other business students, marketing students for their projects to analyze and help us develop marketing plans for some of the various projects that we do. So it's opened the doors for lots of relationships and possibilities that we're excited about.
To me, the big change is more people coming in, the magnetic attraction of the new space, of different styles of worship that we've done, like the Teze and the Vespers. It's bringing in a lot of new people who otherwise wouldn't really know what we do here.
And when they put this in and they got all these different chairs, it was like, wow, this is amazing. We can do so much. It's a meditation space, it's a performance space, it's a worship space, it's just beautiful. It's so inviting.
I think when people are putting their intentions on the line and taking risks, then it's very, very much more alive to the wider community. It attracts people from the outside.
Today with worshiping in the round, it's such a great, the altar and the priest aren't up on a higher level anymore. It's everyone down on the same level. It's like supremely democratic in a way. I really like that.
This real joy and passion of wanting to praise and wanting to worship and wanting to be here and interact with other people.
That's part of our ethos, is that attention and intention around beauty and doing things with love and care, which ties into the environment and the way that we treat each other, is that our space should reflect that who we say we are and what we do.
Of messages in there about partnering with new parties, changing space, being open. That happens to be the parish assignment. That's where I do a lot of my experimental lab work as to what might happen. I'll give you the story of St. Luke's in a second here, but let's just go to the website for a moment. There's nothing on the website from a sound perspective, but you'll see that it looks a fair bit different. And it's actually attracting, a lot of younger folks. It's attracting a lot of former Roman Catholics as well, and United folks who want to have more of a mystical experience. So we actually branded ourselves within the Ottawa community as the contemplative offering. We didn't say contemplative Anglican offering. We said the contemplative offering. And so we're getting a lot of people coming, some to the first service, but particularly to our second service in the afternoon. We've gone from less than 30 attendees to having 2 full services in 4 years. We've had tremendous growth, 3.5 times, okay? And it's because we have a contemplative offering with Teze services, etc. The labyrinth itself has paid for itself in a year's time. People come and pay $20 as donation to walk the labyrinth one night each month. We have our own internal facilitator who happens to come there from the contemplative perspective, her and her husband, from a Roman Catholic background. They were looking for, in a sense, if we were going to market as Anglicans, sorry, here, I'm stepping way out on the limb. We are the Catholic Church that you wish the Roman Catholic Church could become. Anyway, did I say that? Yes, I did. But people have been telling me that, well, geez, if we could only be like this, I would have stayed with the Roman Catholic Church. But it's interesting what is coming. So we are very much a contemplative Eastern form. We're much more Jonian than many places versus Paulinian. And I don't know, it seems to appeal to a particular demographic. So if you're the only Anglican church in a small town, you might not be able to specialize per se, but when you are one that's within a city that has a number of options, they can't, I would say, all be the same shade of the same thing. There could be different niches. And our contemplative niche seems to really, really work. And actually, when you do the contemplative portion of it, which is a lot more singing with the voice, maybe guitar support or a mandolin, is that the cost of your music goes way down too. Anyway, just put it that way. And you attract a whole different set of folks. I'm not saying everybody should be a contemplative offering, but what is your offering? What is your difference? What is your niche? And how can the building support that? If we hadn't removed the pews and made the space functionable, we notice we had a few pews still there that would move around, but we couldn't have offered the second service, nor could we be offering it out to so many folks. I mean, the most recent one that I was involved with earlier this week was the annual general meeting, the Ottawa Alliance to End Homelessness, again, on mission, and they were able to use it, but with pews they wouldn't have been able to use it as such. So it just gives you a flavor. It's actually a growing congregation. Again, it was lower than 30 people on average attendance. It's now, between the two services, about 145 people. And the givings have gone up substantially. And anyways, there are ways. Again, mission and the building have to coincide. So let us go to the next slide then. Okay, here's St. Luke's. This has a bit of a story to it. It was the working class English-speaking folks from England predominantly that worked in the area we call the Britain Flats, which is where all the factories were. If anybody knows Ottawa, it's now basically a brownfield site that they're remediating because all the buildings burnt down some time ago. It then was Little Italy for a while. Now it's Chinatown. And it's gone through some pretty tough shape situations. And the St. Luke's is on the corner of Somerset and Bell Street. Bell Street is known as the highest concentration of rooming houses within Ottawa. 30% of all the rooming houses in Ottawa are on that street. And so we, as a parish, some 20 years ago, took down the hall. This is a scrappy parish. I tell you, it's scrappy. It knows how to survive. Knows how to reposition itself. Took down its hall. It has, on the side of it, 44 apartments rent geared to income. Now that was under a program. We actually get that. We hold the real estate, but we get back the full revenue of it in another 15 years' time. There's a parking garage on the first floor of it. We get the revenue from that starting next year. We got a cash infusion, which we put into the restructuring the church building 20 years ago to be able to not deal with the hall. We actually fixed the basement. It then became very quickly after that something called St. Luke's, which is now called St. Luke's Table. We feed 300 people twice a day out of there. That's a large ministry to the point where it was killing the parish almost to do it, so it's become a diocesan ministry. What is happening now, instead of us sort of using some of that space for part of the parish work, it's now totally converted over to that particular mission of the diocese. So we're condensing ourselves down from something that was probably 12,000 square feet, then down to 8,600 square feet. Now we're giving away 4,300 of that. We're condensing all our activities down to 4,300 square feet, which is in the upper level. That's why we had to make the space flexible. What we said through a process, our space is going to be environmentally friendly, flexible space in which others can use and we can also worship. Remember, we didn't say we're creating into worship space that others could use. We're saying space in which people could use and we could worship in. And so we've been able to do that. And actually, it's been working for us. So now with 4,300 square feet, you see in the video we had actually again, maybe you use universities to help you on certain things, but often faith groups use them to help them on heritage stuff or historical stuff. We actually use the business school in the marketing program. Think about that. Because you have to start thinking about what's your brand, who you're reaching to, what's the business plan, what's the strategy, etc. And as we've grown, we've actually attracted a fair number of senior executives who were not there 4 years ago. And so we have a lot more talent. So if it looks like something is happening, people will come to it. If it looks like it's not happening or it's dying, the people don't want to join to it. People stay with it because of sentimentality, but people don't join something that doesn't look like it's happening. So that's what Situation St. Luke's is. Now, if we flip to the next slide, there's a bit more here too. It's about transitions as well, because whereas we went through the process and as we want an environmentally friendly, flexible space in which people can use and we can also worship, is that we had to go through a transition of people because the congregation got down so small, but now most everybody's been there less than 2 years, and the vast majority of the parish council has been less than 2 to 3 years. Is that we still had to transition those people who were in love with the pews, but we had to go through a process, and then that was an outcome. People tried to get rid of the pews before a previous priest did. But it was not as a part of anything particular. It was just about removing the pews. And now it was like we have this vision, we bought into this vision, and these are the steps to allow us to accomplish the vision, and then it made sense to do these various things at that point. So the mission needs to be understood to be able to do anything with your buildings that makes any sense. So don't just knee-jerk change buildings if you haven't figured out your mission. Again, it helped us build. We removed in the video it says we're going to have a sliding pulpit. Well, we decided not to put the pulpit back there at all. And here's improve the sight lines, and it decreased the barriers as well between the priest and the congregation if we worshiped in nave and chancel. Next slide, please. Repurposing to smooth the transition. We sort of did double duty here. We took some of the woodwork that was in the pulpit, that was in the communion rail, and we repurposed them. And part of it's in communicating with. We use this here. This is the mobile altar that we use when we worship in the round. It's got wheels on it. It is a combination. The top is the back of pews, and the bottom is the fretwork is the fretwork from the pulpit. And so somebody says, "Wow, that was dedicated as a pulpit." We say, "Well, isn't it a promotion to become an altar?" Now, I'm not a big person in regard to plaques. I think they're problematic. I'm a little more diplomatic. Diplomatic. I'm not diplomatic at all. I'm more democratic. It's like, to me, I'm sorry. I'm rich enough to give money, so I should be recognized by a plaque. I don't like that, but that's my thing. But also the main part about it is that, it's got a plaque on it, you can't change it. Makes it really difficult, okay? So in the process of doing the work at St. Luke's, I went in there and removed all the plaques. Before anybody went in there and I pulled the communion rail apart and pulled the pulpit apart. People didn't think the renovations were going to start until a certain date. I went in there earlier because if anybody showed up, they would have said, "No, don't do that." Sorry, I get a bit of tough love. It's not quite like taking a tractor and knocking over an outhouse, but it was a bit of that. And the thing is, when they were gone, people didn't notice they were gone. Okay? Now, on a few occasions, such as we had to transition this. Now, this happens to be the font. Now, this font is a combination. These pieces on the bottom are the remnants of the communion rail. Again, well, it was promotion of a communion rail to a font. A font's more important than the communion rail. And so they were able to accept it. And it made it more flexible because the previous font we had was 600 pounds of stone. And we couldn't move it around, okay? So, like, part of it is flexibility, but part of it's in doing that. It's not like, get rid of the past. It's like transition the past into the future as such. What we also used when we did this was that we did a little bit of double duty. The people that did the woodworking for us, something called a Good Day Workshop, which is a mission of Shepherds of Good Hope, is for people from the street to learn skills. And they do beautiful work. This is absolutely beautiful work, taking pieces of furniture and putting them together and making something new. I mean, those are good-looking things. Thanks. Next one. And then, whoa, how did that happen? That's strange. It's not like the whole slide's upside down, only the picture. Anyways, this happens to take something out of storage. This was since we removed the pulpit, we moved the lectern over to where the pulpit was again. And we said, well, where are we going to put the Bible? So we found up in the tower, we were cleaning out that stuff. People save stuff, my goodness. Anyways, things like broken windows. Why were they saving those for? Anyways, up amongst it, we had this really tall lectern. I don't know where it would have been placed ever, because if you put it way down the floor and you're up on the chancel, it's like, whoa, wait a second, it's too low for you. So we had the Shepherds of Good Hope, the Good Day Workshop, chop it off. And it looks really nice when it's really up and straight. But what it is that you can actually bring heritage out of the tower, not out of the closet, out of the tower here. And so you say, like, we haven't chucked out the past, we've transitioned the past. That's my main message from that one. Let's look at St. Matthew's Anglican in Winnipeg. St. Matthew's, a little story here, largest Anglican building west of Toronto. Huge. 1,200 people could sit there. Happened to it was the Second World War. Soldiers came back, got loans from the Veteran Land Administration, went and built houses out in the suburbs. Wasn't much left around St. Matthew's. And it declined over a period of time to where at C&E, the best they had was 125 people in a place that could hold 1,200. So first thing they tried to do, well, it gets other denominations to come in, etc. They get a lot of little ones. But still, they never needed more than 125 seats. And yet there was 1,200 space for 1,200 there. Let's go next slide. So they created, now here's part of it. Not everything has to happen in the name of the corporation of the parish. Some of it you can set up foundations, some of it you can set up other things, other lines of business as well that you're part of, but you don't have to put everything into your own parish council. So they created the West End Commons as a project of St. Matthew's, non-profit housing, and then one of the other congregations that was in the space. And they're opening this month, actually. And it's rather interesting is that they have created 26 apartments inside this building that was the size of a hockey arena. There are 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom apartments for people at risk or new immigrants or various situations. They also have a worship space for about 125. That's 6 different denominations. Small groups rotate through. They have cooking area, nutrition training area, counseling offices, and in their basement is where the social enterprise center for that portion of Winnipeg is run out of. So they are social enterprise centers. Well, you may not know what social enterprises are and social enterprise centers are, but you will in a few minutes. It's where those folks that aren't coming to church are, those 20 and 30-year-olds doing their good things. You know, we don't go and say, hey, you're a social enterprise. Hey, you got to join us. No, we come to the table and partner with them, and then the 3 B's may work. Find a way to belong together. Find a way to work together. Find a way, well, we actually can believe these type of things. Actually, I know Social Enterprise Center. People started them, working with them. They're extremely doing gospel work without necessarily saying, I've got a label of a denomination on it. So there are some really good signs of hope, and I'll show them to you in a moment. Let's hit this video.
Are you in the market for a few church pews or a pipe organ? Well, St. Matthew's is selling. The Winnipeg Church is converting more than 12,000 square feet of space into affordable housing units. No easy task and no easy decision, considering what the church has come to mean for hundreds of parishioners. Here's Global's Tamara Furlansky.
It's a place to seek solace, find acceptance, and ask the unanswerable questions. For more than a century, people have walked into St. Matthew's Anglican Church and felt at home. Now they really and truly will be.
The area we're walking through right now in the near future won't exist anymore. This will all be taken out, all these stairs will be removed, and there'll actually be floors of suites put in here. You're standing probably in the edge of the bedrooms. Living room is more over to this side. And then you would go through under the beam. They're actually putting stairs down and back up again, so that you go up into the loft from there. We've tried to salvage a lot of the wood, so we take it apart by hand. All the brick came out, and we took it all apart by hand, and it's been salvaged out. So it's a little bit of a process.
The church at the corner of St. Matthew's Avenue and Maryland Street is being converted into 25 rental suites. When it opens in 2014, the West End Commons will house essential services, language programs, and a soup kitchen, and be the permanent address for low-income families, as well as those with mental health issues.
When people come in here, it's going to still look like it's in a church?
It's going to still have this ceiling inside the building. So if you're one of the suites that are on either end of the north or south end of the building, and you're in your loft, you're going to have this magnificent wood ceiling as you're seating in your loft. The center core, which goes all the suites look into, it's a play area, and we actually have the play structure from the airport.
Are you going to try to keep all the stained glass windows?
We'll try to see if we can find someone to purchase these or donate them to somebody, but take them as they are in one piece. If not, what we'll do is we'll see if we can take it apart and either sell it or get someone to take it in pieces. So again, a religious figure isn't something that a lot of people want, but except for a church or another religious place. But the top windows could be easily used. If we can have someone buy it, then that will go back into our construction program, so it'll offset some of our costs.
Did you come across any surprises while you were doing this work?
This is a giant entranceway. When we took the plaster off the walls, behind the walls were the original stained glass windows from 1900, and it was the only remaining piece of the building that still had the original stained glasses, the original woodwork that wasn't touched by fire. When you're transitioning a building like this, there are a lot of people that were wed here, that had funerals here, that were brought up here. I mean, the Boys and Girls Club used to be here. So there's a lot of people who have a connection to the building that this just allows them to still maintain that connection.
While the church is very much a construction zone, it's still holding services for its congregation, at times proving challenging for workers and parishioners.
We've been pumping these things through the floor, so there's going to be more of these little surprises come up every once in a while. Our next ones are going to be plumbing stacks, so they're going to be, I think there's 17 of them are going to be erupting into the floor space. They'll be boxed in, or we'll hide them behind a church pew.
When it's done, it will still look like a church from the outside, but the sacred structure will be missing a few key fixtures. Its organ and its 2,000 pipes are being dismantled and taken to another Winnipeg church.
How delicate is this process?
It's very delicate. Each of the pipes, I understand, has to have its own case because a scratch and a dent in it changes the tone on it. Well, he's been at it now for upwards of 2 months already, and he'll be at it for a little while yet.
Even though part of the building will be set aside for the congregation, the decision to convert the crumbling church wasn't easy.
The rain was coming in each of the four corners of this sanctuary, and it was going down the walls, and so there was mold forming in the basement, and the building had become bigger in its needs than the congregation had the capacity to sort. And so we either had to close the building and to close what was happening here or transform it.
That is costing $6.2 million. While all levels of government have helped out, St. Matthew's still needs to raise $1.4 million. It's a difficult task for parishioners, almost as hard as facing a very different future.
Stained glass and the roof and the pews and everything cues them to what a beautiful place this was. And that past tense that this was has an edge. right? A bittersweet kind of edge to it.
It's hard to give it up. No question about that.
Bob Clarkson was baptized and married here. He's watched his children do the same. Memories that will still live on.
Our attitude was basically the building was put here for the use of the community as a church, and there's no reason why the community shouldn't continue to benefit.
We can actually just go to the next slide, because that was a video that the CTV took at the time when they were doing this and talking about why they were doing this and the renovations. Now, interestingly, in St. Matthew's in Winnipeg, Reverend Kathy Campbell, they were able to retain much of the heritage aspects of it interiorly. The significant pieces, not crumbling plaster pieces, but the significant wood pieces and whatever else. And they were fit in there. So let's just go to the next one. This is a mock-up of the inside that they work on. But here's some of the things in progress. Let's go to the next one. Okay, sorry. Let's go back to that one. I'll tell more of the story. And the thing here too is to understand in this project, as most projects are, is that there's a roles that have to be played. In major changes at St. Luke's, or at which isn't as major as St. Matthew's, is that it requires a clergy to do various things. Leadership from a perspective of being bold enough to let it start and encouraging it to start, but then stepping aside so they won't become the target of the change per se, so they can still provide pastoral support to those who don't feel good about the change. You can't be the causer of the change, causer of the grief, etc., and then be the pastor at the same time. And I said this last evening, most people who end up in the pastoral area really don't like conflict, so they're not usually the ones to take the tractor and tip over the outhouse. And then you need very strong leadership as well in the lay area. Now, as in this case, it was a 10-year project. That's how long it takes. The Kathy, very strong clergy. I'll tell you what, she's moving forward to the next General Synod. And then it happened to be the Deputy Minister of Finance for province of Manitoba by the name of Clarkson was one of the parishioners. So they had very strong leadership on the lay side to get this done. But it takes a combination of those things. And what Kathy, I've gotten to know Kathy Campbell through Creation Matters, which is that national group I chair for the Anglican Church, which is implementing 5 Marks, the 5th Marker mission, and several of the resolutions. She was the one that got me onto this. It isn't just about praying for better things to happen in creation and about liturgical resources and singing about it and doing a bit of policy work, she said, and doing a bit of rewiring and improving your furnace. She said it's really about your buildings performing better and performing it from a perspective of being true to what's required today. And so, as a result of the 2013 General Synod, one of the 2 joint resolutions we have with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, one is responsible resource extraction, and the other one is housing and homelessness and affordable housing. And this is homelessness and affordable housing. A lot of people say, "Oh, we did a lot of work. We got now a resolution. It's in print. The job's done." No. So the next General Synod, the resolutions moving forward is that with our surplus real estate, is that we aim it towards addressing homelessness and affordable housing as much as possible, and provide funds from the sale of those places that are not appropriate for that purpose to help support and build some of this to happen. I know that this year in the Ottawa Diocese, we're actually at a diocesan level adopting something of this nature ourselves. It falls in nicely with this Embracing God's Future program we just been engaged in. But more of this to happen. This can happen, and you will be on mission, and you'll be feasible as well. Let's go to the next one then. This happens to be Cathedral Hill in Ottawa. The cathedral, right there. It's one of the real prime real estate locations in Ottawa. It's on a bluff overlooking a park and the Ottawa River. You can see the Supreme Court, the National Library, the Parliament buildings from there. 21-story, was much taller than that now. That was only taken a few weeks ago. They're going to be moving in about 3 months' time. 21-story LEED Platinum condominium. Now, LEED is leadership in energy and environmental design, and platinum is the highest standard. There are very few platinum buildings. So the particular builder for this is called Windmill Developments, and it was, they're Dutch folks, it's not that they build windmills, but anyways. Westijn is their name. Every project they build themselves has hit platinum. They are the greenest builders in the world at the present, and they have to be an Ottawa-based company, but they build all over the place. And the cathedral specifically chose to build this high environmental standard to make a statement about the Fifth Market mission. Okay, and what has happened here is that the cathedral still owns the land, and it's on a long-term lease. And what happens is that there was an injection into the repairs the cathedral needed, and a new hall given to them, which is now, it isn't just a hall, it is a conference center, which is in the base of this, and then a cash stream for the next 199 years on the lease. Now, there has been some criticism by certain folks to say, well, where's the social housing in this? Well, when you can sell it for $650 per square foot, and these are mostly 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 square foot locations, you know how expensive those are. It's probably better to get the value out of it that way and then take some of those annual revenue streams, and what they're doing is St. Luke's Table, which is in the basement of St. Luke's Parish, which is about 6 blocks away, is getting it supported, and the food quality has gone up substantially, and things. So you can divert to the same purposes. You don't have to do it exactly on that site. Now, on the other side of the cathedral, to the side that's off the screen here, there is going to be a 12-story wood frame construction building. This will be the tallest wood frame construction building in Canada. It's not like 2x4s and 2x6s. It's glue lam and then cross-laminated timbers. And then it's going to be a symbol as well to what to do with wood-based stuff. Again, platinum LEED. And the parking lot underneath it will be the parking lot for the cathedral. Now, the other part is that the cathedral is grouped together in amongst these buildings, so that actually the cathedral itself performs better heating and cooling systems. And the pile of rocks called the cathedral is also a heat sink for some of the other stuff that happens there. So it's a rather interesting integration. And that's just an example of what can be done at cathedrals when you're not based on a town that you can only go as high as a steeple type of thing. But anyway, the nearest church. So that's what's happening at Cathedral Hill. But again, it took a very strong dean who's spending most of his time being the point of contact. It's also, they happen to have in the congregation some significant real estate lawyers, plus also the very recently retired CEO of Canada Lands Corporation, which is an organization to disperse surplus federal land. So he really knew the process of all this. You were going to ask a question?
Yes. That's not in front of the cathedral, is it?
No. The cathedral looks out onto the Ottawa River. That is to the west of the cathedral, because the cathedral mostly looks, well, not west. In Ottawa, it's sort of on an angle. So they look sort of the south and east. This is it's on the northwest side. So yeah. It's actually making a lot of recognition for the cathedral, and actually the conference center is going to be well used. It's actually used between the building and between the cathedral, so multi-purpose. Let's try another one. Well, there's some more examples of Cathedral Hill. So again, talking about this, it happens to be the condominiums in the backdrop, and this is the sign that talks about the office building, which is actually going to be office condominiums as well. What is interesting, those who want to make a statement, for example, the environmental related organizations are the ones that are buying the office condominiums. So we're actually, beside the cathedral, having many of the non-government organizations that want to promote that they are keenly involved with environmental and creation care. So we have a significant thematic there. So you can do double duty with some of these things. Let's go to another one. St. Albans. St. Albans, and we will go into St. Albans in a second there. St. Albans is the church of Sir John A. Macdonald. Let's talk about time. He was a Presbyterian, had to become an Anglican to be able to be Prime Minister. That was that period of time, okay? Anyways, he's got hey, that's what it was at that time. St. Albans had been abandoned. It had been abandoned because the particular priest didn't like gay marriage, same-sex marriage, and took his congregation to the Anglican Network in Canada, and then we had to basically tell him to leave. So it was a vacant spot, and so there was no congregation there. And so here's an example of starting from zero and having only a few years later a very young congregation that has the highest givings per identifiable giver of any in the whole diocese, because they created their worship service together. It follows the Anglican pattern, but sometimes instead of stuff out of the hymn books, you get some today's music in it. Sometimes instead of some of the readings, you actually get some poetry read and discussed. They have a significant mission. Now, in the basement, which is the second photo here, is where Center 454. It's a social service center that's also part of the diocese. They have just taken over the basement there. There was quite a few, upwards of $2 million placed in this building here to redo the basement. And so thus, for the parish operates upstairs. Any of the offices, anything they had downstairs is no longer available to them because it's used as this social center for services to people. They've had to be very creative of how they use their space, considering how much historical designation they have on it. Why don't we hit on here? We have we have, you know how you go on Google Maps and you can see a street view? Well, they have an inside the church view here too. Let's hope it works. They refer to themselves as St. Al's. I believe it's further down. There's a, oh goodness. Inside, look inside. There we are. And why don't you just do a roundabout here? These are the beams from the basement when they were retrofitted. Glass partitions, multi-use rooms in the back of the nave. And here's the coffee area out back here as well. And some of them, of course, the washrooms are in there too. They are obviously frosted glass. Except for a little place like this big. And then the Sunday school area too. They're big on using puppets for telling stories. Actually, the priest is a puppeteer. And just come a bit further back. And then, I mean, you can conserve, is look up at the ceiling. You can conserve well, it's not quite like that. But you can conserve all the aspects of a building. And that's where, First Prime Minister Macdonald's pew is in there too, but you notice there's chairs in there as well. And the pews are no longer affixed down to the floor. They've decided not to replace the pews until they can actually put more money aside to buy good chairs. But they have got certain things here. It's very flexible. That whole area up there, that organ hasn't been played since they moved in there because they're away from organ music. Sorry for organ players, but it's an expensive proposition to maintain those. And it's praise band, it's different things, it's poetry for readings, it's music that's more contemporary in a sense. It's not praise band music per se, or it's like where can you find it out of the secular mainstream music, various spiritual type pieces. Anyways, that's St. Al's. And then there's the coffee shop in the back, too, as well. And they're near the University of Ottawa. They are part of a group of more progressive urban churches that have you've heard of pub crawls. They have church crawls. They have tweet services where while the sermon's being given or something's happening, you can tweet and it goes up on the screen which say, this is reminding me of such and such, or this is what's important to me, this is what's inspiring me at the moment. They can reach people in the way they need to hear the word and understand it today. And they've gone from a point of no congregation to having 2 services a day.
on Sunday. Again, a bit like St. Luke's, which has an afternoon service where we eat off of the altar. Our time together, our fellowship time is on the altar. Do the Eucharist, throw a tablecloth, serve food. Again, a bit like St. Gregory of Nyssa or like St. Benedict's table. St. Benedict's table in Manitoba, 200 attendees, a lot of artists and poets and stuff. If you were on the national website last year, for the whole Vespers music that was on the national website was done from the broadcasting studio and recording studio at St. Benedict's in Winnipeg. Okay? So St. Luke's is starting to become known as the St. Benedict's of the East. Our bishop sent our priests to St. Benedict's and to St. Gregory of Nyssa to bring that into what we can offer within the city of Ottawa. In this case, they're a contemporary urban church, and the way they do things is very different, but you can always recognize the Anglican service pattern within it. So we have latitude to do these things. We have to speak to the people in the way they are, but the building has to be in that form and fashion to do it as well. Again, youngest average age congregation, and somewhere in the early 30s, the highest giver per identifiable giver of all the parishes in Ottawa. Again, started from 0, 4 years later, there it is. So St. Luke started with a very small remnants. I asked last evening with some people, who do you think had a more difficult time? The one with small remnants of the old congregation, or the one that started from 0? Which one do you think it was? Yeah, the one that started with the people just plain didn't want to change. Here they invented together what church meant to them, what community meant to them. Now, interestingly, both of those priests have business backgrounds first. Knew about marketing, knew about communications, knew about organizing things. I'm just saying, there's different skill sets at different times. And if you don't happen to have that in the priest category, you need to find some lay people to work side by side with on these things. Because now it's about a lot of those disciplines. I mean, I one time was on a parish council in a different parish when I lived in the country, and if I used a business-sounding word, this little lady who was from one of the points in the parish, knitting there all the time, "You're using a business term. Stop that. That's not church." And I go, "Oh, goodness, don't we have financial statements here? We have income and expenses, and aren't we trying to grow something here? I mean, we should use, it's just another discipline to use. It's not bad per se." Anyway, so there's St. Al's. That's their meal together and chit-chatting and whatever else. So they've changed these. Yeah, Mark in the back here, he was a CEO of an information technology communications company. Very successful. Basically doesn't have to work for the rest of his life after he sold that, but he's dedicated his life to God and Jesus and the Anglican Church, and incredible stuff that he's doing there. So let's go to another one. Social enterprise. This is one of my signs of hope. When I said, who knows what a social enterprise is? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people. Get to know what social enterprises are. And I'll connect it to the Anglican Church very directly. At lunch today, our speaker from Grant Thornton, she indicated to us that she was also the chair of the Community Foundation chair of the Finance Committee of the Community Foundation of Fredericton. Various cities across the country have community foundations. They're usually some organization that has money to put into good beneficial things, that are social or environmental or whatever. And they all wrap up into a national federation called the Community Foundations of Canada. And the recently retired CEO of Community Foundations of Canada, a lady by the name of Monica Patton, Order of Canada awardee, is an Anglican. Not only is she an Anglican, she headed up in the Ottawa Diocese a $12 million fundraising campaign that was extremely successful. She's now, as a favor to the primate, is now heading up the fundraising for the Anglican Church of Canada. And now, Monica was on this task force to talk about and to make recommendations to the Government of Canada in regard to how to mobilize private capital for social benefits. Now, former Prime Minister Martin was asked by Prime Minister Harper to chair that. That was rather interesting. But anyways, Monica was on that task force as well. So we have a really interesting annual connection. We also have somebody who really understands this stuff. And so how do you mobilize private capital for social benefit? Often it is to what they refer to as social enterprise centers. And this is where some business support is. This is where people mix and mingle. People get creative. People get really excited about stuff. It's not a for-profit. It's not a not-for-profit. It's somewhere within there. It's how they call them social enterprises, where they're able to pay themselves, etc. And actually, I'm going to tell you a story about one of them. I was invited to something called an event one evening, and when you come in to the Social Enterprise Center for this particular event, you place your business card in one glass bowl, and then you go and you wander around and look at all these booths, and these booths are set up by various social enterprises. And then there's 20 that evening. So 10 would present, and you get 90 seconds. And sort of like anybody who's been in an improv place, like improv theater or whatever, instead of a lot of clapping, it was 90 seconds, bing, you have stuff, and people go, woof, woof. So we got this 90 seconds, woof, woof, and then 10 of them presented. Then we had a bit of chance to mix and mingle, and then another 10 of them presented, and woof, woof. And then at the end of that, it was all well understood that there was a bit, in the second bowl, was a bunch of money, okay? And so 4 business cards were drawn to split the pot 4 ways. And this money would have come from various places, donations, or whatever else, so that these social enterprises continue their mission. So my card was drawn second. Now, part of the rules was that if you drew a card, you couldn't give it to yourself. Well, I was none of the above social enterprises, so I could choose anybody. And so I chose something called Hidden Harvest. Now, Hidden Harvest is run by 2 young folks in their mid-late 20s. And they recognized that there were trees and shrubs and whatever else around the city that the city referred to them as nuisance trees because the apples would fall off on the street and it was a nuisance to clean them up. And so what they've done is they've identified various trees and shrubs and nut trees and raspberry plants and whatever else, and they would knock on the door of householders and say, look, we'll pick these up for you. Do you mind? Oh, no, that's just a mess for us. Eh? And sometimes people actually raked it up and put it on the front porch, just come by and get it. And they delivered those to places where people from the street were being fed. Or they were delivered to food banks. And if they had some extra stuff, they would make into jams and jellies and then sell them at farmers markets. And what they did with their money was that they would go and they would plant new trees at schools and places like that. And so there will always be a hidden harvest. Now, this particular social enterprise won the Governor General's Award last year and ended up being on a TV series of commercials about volunteerism. This social enterprise, as you look around these 20 organizations, they were all those folks in their 20s and 30s doing very gospel-related ministry without coming through the door of a church. We got to get to them. That's why some of them are starting social enterprise centers, giving some real estate for them to do their stuff. Anyways, so they gave me something, which was a tree to plant at my place. At that point, silly me, I moved from a farm into a condominium. Too much of a move. Anyways, I'm not in the condominium anymore. But I had nowhere to plant my particular tree. I said, no, don't worry, Mr. Goodfellow. We'll plant this for you. That was 8:30 at night. 11 o'clock the next morning, I get an email from a vice principal of a school saying, thank you very much for the donation. The tree was planted this morning. What responsiveness is that, eh? They do it electronically. They mobilize electronically. They mobilize teams to go pick stuff up, etc. That's how today's 20 and 30-year-olds work. They're not joiners of clubs. They do stuff. And to me, that's really important there. And that's what a social enterprise center is about, and that's what social enterprises are about. Let's go to some element here. Key demographic. Let's hit this once. There's a connection there. It's just a website. There's no video. So what they love is old buildings because it gives a particular aura of helping people interact. It's not sterile. Who has old buildings like that? Anyways, let me ask the question. But what they do is provide maximum opportunity for interaction between people and creativity. They run it that way. They specifically set things up. This particular lady, Tanya Sherman, I met her last week, like 2 weeks ago, at Heritage Canada's annual general meeting. And I'll talk about Heritage Canada in a moment. Heritage is not necessarily a bad word. Natalie, you haven't showed up. Okay, so I'll tell you about that in a second. Is that she was there because Heritage Canada is really concerned about the number of faith buildings we have that are going to fall in disrepair really rather quickly and lose heritage. And it used to be, thou must fix it to be exactly like it was when it was built. Now it's like, that was version 1.0. Now it's version 4.0. That you got to help the owners of these buildings create some sort of feasibility to be able to keep these buildings up, and they need new partnerships. And so what she was suggesting with them, something I've seen too, the organizer of this conference, so they had Tonya come and speak. And she has 4 of these going. One in New York City was given to her by one of the large real estate developments. Here's this old building, do what you can. They have 90,000 square feet in New York City. I had a gal from Toronto, they had 3 in Toronto. And it's with all these really energetic folks. Now, interestingly, I thought, anyway, I think the organization, I think in my bio it said I'm on the board of Faith in the Common Good, which is a multi-faith organization working on environmental issues and social issues, etc. I'm actually the incoming chair of that, replacing a former moderator of the United Church. I think I'm the first lay person on that. But that says December the 5th. So we're moving from just doing green audits of buildings and helping establish gardens and things like this to actually also working more closely with congregations who are in transition. So Tonya makes this presentation with social enterprise centers. It sounds really good. And I asked her a question. I said, so how does faith group buildings fit within this? Are they appropriate? Boom, boom, boom. And she gave me a comment. And afterwards, she found me out. She says, actually, I'm breaching confidentiality here. She says, the next thing that I want to do beyond social enterprises is actually work with faith communities to repurpose their buildings. She finds that to be an extremely high calling. How do you repurpose? That doesn't mean the faith community evacuates. It means that what alongside can happen. And who are the new partners, per se? To me, these social enterprises are centers, and the enterprises that happen to them are fantastic new partners. Now, you heard Gregor Stedden, our priest, talk about St. Luke's, the Social Enterprise Center. We've got the point where we've got so much mission per square foot happening, we can't actually have the Social Enterprise Center within St. Luke's, but, let's go to the next slide. The Social Enterprise Center in Ottawa that is nearest us is called the West End Well. It is owned by a couple of our parishioners from the real estate perspective. This is called the West End Well, Nourishment for a Change. And the bottom spot is a cooperative grocery, local providers, and the upstairs is it's the Enterprise Center where office space and support and creative interaction happens. We provide nourishment from the spiritual perspective. We have our pastoral team go over there and are known to be on site for conversations with people who want to address pastoral things or spiritual things. Guess who we're addressing it with? People in their 20s and 30s. Now, the people with the money happen to be the folks that actually are contemplative, seem to be the ones involved in this significantly. They're the ones that actually own the building, created the Social Enterprise Center, but the social enterprises themselves are being run by 20s and 30-year-olds. Okay? Get to know about social enterprise centers. That's where your demographic is. Okay, let's go to the next one. Buildings serve mission or not. Next slide. I'll give you a story. I'll give you a story in a second, but some people may disagree with me, but the church is a community of people, not the building. We have church buildings. The church building is a church building, it's not the church. And without a solid understanding of the longer-term mission of the congregation, how can you make a decision on buildings? You just don't go out and say, hey, everybody has X, let's do an X. Well, what's appropriate for whatever your mission is? In a sense, the building is a tool that helps or hinders with the mission. Here's one. This is just 2 blocks down the street from me. This is a case that we looked at, and I know the person because who orchestrated all the changes at this location. They had 3 United Church congregations in a not too far distance from each other. They had something called Northwestern, something called Kingsway, and something called Westboro United. This is where Westboro United was. does say Presbyterian there, but you know what happened in 1925. This is one of the ones that went to the United Church. And they did an assessment of, from a financial perspective, well, what should they sell, what should, etc. And so they had 50 here, 50 there, and 100 there. They formed something called Kitchissippi United. Kitchissippi is the ward of Ottawa, which this is located. And they chose to put it at what was Kingsway, smack right against the major highway, and you can't even find the place. Why did they move there? Well, that's where the 100 were. Well, guess what they're back down to? 100. They didn't do a missional plan, because if they'd done a missional plan, they would have said, this is the worst location for us to locate at. Northwestern, the mosque is going to buy the place, already using it, renting it. They should have moved into this location. It was where their mission, that they eventually thought we should do these type of things. Oh crap, we're in the wrong location. Okay, so what this is that is now Festival House, where all the music festivals in Ottawa are headquartered. There is some performing space within that, but the area around it was all these ramble shacks of Sunday school rooms. Like, yeah, sure, we have 400 kids. Now we have no kids. What do we do with these? Well, we'll let them deteriorate. It's now brownstones, okay? Now, if the congregation itself had been more entrepreneurial, it would have chose this location for its mission, would have sold the other two, and done the brownstone project itself, and some other arrangement then just sell it. Now, they would try to actually give this away to one of the social agencies, women's shelter, and like, here it is for $1. On the other side, there was no receptor capacity to actually consider how to do this, which is one of the shortcomings with many social groups, is that they have ongoing operations capabilities, but they often don't have these major change management capabilities and taking on a piece of real estate. It's a deficiency, let's put it that way, which needs to be addressed. But this is the story of Festival House. So we created a mission, something called Mission Building Forum. And I'll stop and we'll take a break in a few minutes here. But last October 26th, myself, a layperson, and Chris Henderson, a layperson, but he's from the United Church, said, look, there's so many buildings going to come on. We don't think there's a capacity to handle it. There's so many at the same time. Why don't we have a mission building? So we said, we're all in it together. Mission buildings, I use the same thing for this one. It's about building mission, but also what the mission to do with the buildings. We don't have to click on that, but you can later. It basically is the agenda. We had Monica Patton opened it by giving some background demographics on things. She has a great background to do that from the community foundations and from her Anglican Church fundraising background. And then there was 4 looked at, was Cathedral Hill, Kitchissippi United, something called St. Bridget's, and something called St. Luke's. You've seen part of the presentation. And then we looked at that because they demonstrated different things. We were promoting mission per square foot at St. Luke's, the Cathedral Hill one, the Dean gave the presentation, and basically addressing that, your mission doesn't absolutely always have to happen at the site where you're located, but as long as you support it. Kitchissippi was, we did it for financial reasons before we had to do our missional plan at the same time, and we chose the wrong thing. And then there was St. Bridget's, which had double heritage designation, inside and outside. It's become the Irish Cultural Center, and they have to put a stage over top of, the movable stage over top of all the pews to be able to perform in there. Anyway, it's just that heritage has to be realistic about some of these things. So we then had several that presented from outside of Ottawa. One was St. Matthew's. It was earlier in its stage of evolution, and another one was St. Gabriel's in Toronto. But the thing was is that these places, when they are addressed properly with a really good missional plan and a very good thought process and deliberateness and some elements of knocking over the outhouse to it, because you can actually go farther than most people want to go, and it still is okay. A bit like, well, it's always been like that here now, 2 years later. That's the things that they absolutely couldn't see ever happening. Is that you can actually create a bunch of buzz, you can create a bunch of happening, you can actually attract people to these locations. Now, one of the outcome of this mission building forum, we had a meeting earlier this week, was that these faith buildings can be converted or repurposed or co-purposed into other things, including being able to address affordable housing and homelessness. And we're actually have created a community land trust in which faith groups can place some of the real estate, and a trust fund. Now, interestingly, we're finding money from high net worth individuals who wouldn't place money directly into a church because they think it's going to be frittered away. Sorry. But they would undertake and put money into a specific initiative such as addressing homeless and housing. And so that's one of the things we've done in Ottawa. Interestingly, Winnipeg has copied exactly our program that we ran last October 26th. And so they're trying to do that in Winnipeg as well. So we're seeing where this could all go. So let's go to the next slide, because I think it's actually okay. So this is all good for urban. What about us rural people? Because, hey, we don't have these opportunities. We're not going to have condominiums there, are we? Yeah. So often it's like the rural people go, yeah, well, that's nice. Now, what I would like to say, though, is that there is an opportunity if you want to be entrepreneurial and creative and think outside the box. There are things to do in rural areas. And I just hearken to one which Trevor could probably, and I have a bit of affinity towards pilgrimage walking. But anyways, the same approach to asking what could happen in a rural area. It's absolutely the same. Refer to the 5 marks of mission for inspiration. Okay? The other one I would say, go to your history. You know how when a parish has its 100th anniversary, 150th anniversary, they like writing the version of the history. So-and-so missionary minister from the Church of England came to us every 4 weeks, and we met in so-and-so's house. And then he rode across the river back to another place, and then he came the next 4 weeks. We may have to go back to home churches, meeting together. Because it's in people's past. It's not like it's in their DNA. It's within their heritage. There's a way of serving people. So in many senses, if we took a particular rural area and say, for a moment here, just imagine all the people that weren't connected, disappeared, we're back to the same type of population as we had in those days of people who were wanting to be practicing Christians. So what is the way to do that? Home houses, home churches is not such a bad thing. I was telling your dean that, Jeffrey, that I actually used to hold meetings in our house, because what's happening is there's a group of folks who want more than what any one denomination or any one parish can offer. And they may be people who are really interested in stuff like that Richard Rohr promotes. There might be some people that really like centering prayer, but you never can find enough in any one congregation. But what you'll find sometimes in a geographic area, people from various denominations who want to get together on certain things. And so some of them are already meeting sort of in a home church type setting. So there's more happening than what you may appreciate, so why wouldn't you just recognize that? And that may happen. The last one here is people ask me, well, what about the rural area? Now, I'm a pilgrimage walker, and I would think, do we have to always go over to Spain to walk the Camino, or over to UK to walk St. Cuthbert's or St. Oswald's or whatever, which I've done? Is that why can't we do that here in Canada? What is walking? What is pilgrimage walking? It is basically a form of meditation. What is a labyrinth? A labyrinth is the same thing. It's just in a smaller setting. It's for those who don't have the time or the physical capabilities of doing a longer walk. And what it is repetition of walking. It brings you closer to God. You usually do it out in nature, etc. You see a lot of things happening. Why do we have to go somewhere else to do that? God's omnipresent. So I was thinking, why don't we take, for example, in East Ontario, the Rideau Trail, and walk from Kingston to Ottawa. It's not that far by road, but it ends up being 305 kilometers when you walk. But you don't have to start at one end and walk the other. You can start part way along. Interesting, the Ottawa end ends at the steps of the Ottawa Cathedral, Anglican Cathedral, just by chance. Anyway, so I'm thinking there's a destination point. But along the way, there's a lot of these small little towns with all these clapboard churches that are only partially open. They're possibly just chapels of ease or whatever. Why not during the July and August period as a spiritual practice, as a way in which these congregations can earn some money, open up those churches for people to sleep? They can provide them an evening meal and morning prayers before they move on. Now, they're doing that in Quebec. Montreal to Quebec City, stopping at various places, but they only have so much capacity of people where they could stay. Why couldn't we do that in a rural context, etc.? I'm not saying, hey, you should develop a pilgrimage trail, but think about it from a rural perspective. How can what you have be of value and appreciated by others? Again, where can you meet God other than Sunday morning? Just creativity. I'm just thinking entrepreneurialism. Actually, we got a social enterprise grant to be able to explore this, so there we are. Next one. Human resources. Oh, I got a great idea. We should do this. This should be done. Unless you're sitting in the room at this committee and you're looking around. So who's going to do it? Look around again. Oh, well, you're always busy. Yeah, but you're so tired, you know. Oh, I can't take anything else. So what happens is some good ideas just can't be executed in the group. And if you don't look outside your group, it's not going to get done. So what you need to start doing is say, where are the partners? Who else has similar objectives as you? And find, they might be the ones to provide some of the expertise. You have to create that story, that opportunity, and engage other partners so that you don't always have to find them within your congregations. And I think I mentioned this already. What is the role of the pastor or priest in this? Maybe to allow it to happen, but not be seen to be the lead that gets shot at because change is happening, because you have to provide that pastoral approach. And usually you're not of the personality type, sorry if I say that, that would really like to create this conflict. You like to resolve conflict. You need some strong lay leadership. I mean, it's time for the lay leadership to step forward, as it has in various points in the past. With this big change in the church, the lay leadership has to really come forward. I think for that point, I think the next one is something totally different. And we'll just leave it there for now. And why don't we just take a break?